there is an article on a Chinese tennis player vanishing from the scene. She vanishes completely after accusing someone very high up in China, very high up in the political sphere, of sexual abuse. So the title of the article, this is on sportbible.com by Ryan Seidel, S-I-D-L-E. The title of the article is a Chinese tennis player vanishes after accusing former vice premier of sexual abuse. And hopefully I won't vanish after going through this article. So it reads, a Chinese tennis player has reportedly gone missing and had her social media posts deleted after accusing Beijing's former vice premier of sexual abuse. Peng Shuai posted accusations that she was abused by Zhang Gaoli, Z-H-A-N-G, Gaoli, G-A-O-L-I, last week on Chinese social media site Weibo, known as the Chinese Facebook. The post, which claimed that Zhang had forced the 35-year-old into sex, was deleted soon after, and reportedly the word Wang Q, which is tennis in Chinese, was even censored on the site for some time after. So this woman, Peng Shuai, who competed just as recently as 2020 in the Australian Open, she is, no one knows where she is right now. She made a post saying that she was abused by Zhang Gaoli, the vice premier, Beijing's former vice premier, and she was possibly snatched off the face of the earth. This makes me think about how good we have it in the U.S. People complain a lot about not being able to speak your mind in the U.S., having your speech censored, not being able to share your opinions boldly and brightly, no matter how smart or stupid or fucking uninformed those opinions may be. A lot of people complain about not being able to share their opinions in the U.S. But one thing we don't have to worry about in the United States is tweeting someone or tweeting something against the president and then having someone from the Secret Service show up at your door and violently murder you in front of your family. And I'm not saying that's what happened to Peng Shui. I hope to God it's not Peng Shui. But that is a great freedom that we have in the United States that gets lost on me as a podcaster. Sometimes I forget that. Sometimes I forget if I lived in other countries, I would have to be much more worried about my personal safety as a podcaster, as someone who throws out content into the ether. And they're much bigger podcasters than me. I'm a small, mid-tier podcast, and so it's not like I'm getting massive amounts of attention compared to, Call Her Daddy, Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, other guys and gals out there that get millions of downloads per episode. But still, there's a great freedom that we enjoy in the U.S. and as a content creator specifically, where I can record something calling Trump an idiot or calling Obama an idiot, calling Biden a piece of shit, disagreeing openly with our political leaders. And as long as I'm not making threats against their life, as long as I'm not calling for violence or saying we should cause physical harm to a political leader, no one's going to come to my door, and at least not right now. I mean, in Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse, anything is possible, but at least right now, no one's going to show up at my apartment, put a black bag over my head, and then drive me off to some black site and beat the fuck out of me until I take down a post. And people forget that if you're in China, shit like this happens. That it is a country that is communist and controls all of social media. They control the narrative. They control what information gets leaked about COVID, any disease, any political happening. China is a communist propaganda machine. And if you choose to go against that machine, you will get brought to your knees digitally and physically, and forced to suck that short, pale Chinese cock, that Chinese communist cock. And I say that as someone with a very average sized penis, and I know that that is a great misrepresentation of all Chinese phalluses. I'm sure there's some large and some small and everything in between, but what came to mind in that moment, what came to my mind in that moment is that Chinese have a small dick stereotype, and I'd like to think that whoever snatched Peng Shui has a very small dick indeed, because they're a very bad person and they don't deserve to have a large cock. I like to think that it's some of the greatest men in the world that are afforded that ability. That would be great if your dick size was determined based on how good or bad of a person you were. Soup kitchens would be flooding with guys in their 20s, just fresh out of college. Guys that are going guys that are going out on a Thursday night. Soup kitchens would be packed to the gills with volunteers at around 7 to 8 p.m. You know, before that first drink and line of Coke, you would get right into the soup kitchen and you would serve as many homeless people as possible, if that would add even a half an inch to your cock for that Thursday night, if you're in hopes of getting lucky. The world would be a much better place if cock size was associated with the size of your heart. If you could do good deeds and give that good dick, there would be the world would be a much better place, would be a much kinder place if you knew that if you did something out of a bad intention to someone, it would not only affect your interactions emotionally and verbally, but it would affect your physical interactions as well. It would be like it would make you think so much more drastically before you did anything if you could be penalized through the form of losing inches to your cock or getting a bigger vagina for gals, because I know that that's something that girls hate is, you know, having a big fat pussy. So it would add an inch of diameter to your pussy or take away an inch of length to your cock if you did something bad. And in this case, you know, Zhang Li should lose almost all of his cock if he snatched up Peng Shui. So let's go into this. Zhang Li, who is now 75 years old, who was a high-ranking member of the Communist Party, was accused of having an affair with the 2014 French Open doubles champion in 2011. So there's a past history here. There's a past history between Zhang and Peng Shui. Peng then claimed that he rekindled things in 2018 after inviting her over for dinner and then pressured her into having sex, which she refused before eventually relenting. According to the Daily Mail, the former number one doubles player has not been seen since the accusations, and that the deleted post isn't the only thing to happen to her profile. The post was gone from Weibo, which is said to have been heavily monitored by the Chinese government, after just 20 minutes, and the rest of her profile soon followed. That is fucking horrifying, to think that you can post something on Facebook in China and knowing that the government is keeping a close watch on you, and your life could be directly affected by the government taking action against you because of a social media post. And I have no, naivete about the government not watching Facebook posts. I think with everything that's come out through Edward Snowden and the surveillance technology that our secret agencies have in the U.S., I think they are employing everything to the fullest to monitor Gmail. When I send emails, I assume those may be read. Even on Google Documents, when I write shit on Google, I assume those documents can be read and are being read and scanned. Phone calls, browser history, tapping into the camera on your computer. I just assume that everything is being watched. But the one thing that doesn't enter my mind is that someone's going to come and take me away because of something that I posted on Facebook. And again, I could understand if I'm threatening someone directly or I'm calling for harm against a certain group. If I am trying to influence physical violence against someone, sure, come get me. I'm a piece of shit and I deserve to be roughed up a little bit. But to post an accusation like this is something akin to what a woman would have posted about the Me Too movement, maybe against some guy like Harvey Weinstein in Hollywood. If someone came out against Harvey Weinstein, and hundreds of women did, and they did it through tweets, a lot of them. Imagine if someone tweeted against Harvey Weinstein, the first person, whoever it was, you just never heard from them again. That's kind of what I think this is like. Like if someone came out against someone big like Harvey Weinstein or like a Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and the first accuser was then wiped off the face of the earth, and then any accuser after that, they get the message, which makes me think that this guy must have done some serious shit if the first person, and this may not be the first, but the first person to openly accuse him on Facebook is gone. And if you were even thinking about accusing this guy of something, of Zhang, whatever his name is, if you were even thinking of accusing him of something, you are no longer doing that. If the consequence of you coming out with a sexual assault allegation is that your family never sees you again and you never get to do anything again, you never get to eat ice cream or watch The Good Place or bike ride through Central Park, you never get to, go snowboarding, you never get to do a kettlebell swing with a 30-pound kettlebell, you never get to do a single-arm kettlebell swing, you never get to, roll out. And I'm saying this because I'm looking at my gym right now. Think about all the things that I can never do physically. If someone came and snatched me up right now and make a podcast, I could never use my foam roller to roll out my left butt cheek, which has been bothering me lately. And it hurts so good. It hurts when I'm rolling over my butt cheek. And then about 30 seconds in, I start to ask for more and more pain because that myofascial release mechanism is so powerful for recovery. I couldn't imagine not being able to roll out my left ass cheek because I refuse to censor my language. My left ass cheek. I refuse to believe that I could no longer do that if someone snatched me up. But the reality is that someone could at anywhere, at any time. If I was in China, releasing podcasts, just wild podcasts, throwing shit against the wall and just see what works. And that's a lot of times that's what I do with the AUX, is that I'm not necessarily trying to be right for everything, because you can't be. But what I want people to do is listen and be engaged and hopefully learn something, and me hopefully learn something too as I'm going through articles. I feel like that's an exciting and interesting way to go through stuff, is read it for the first time and see what pops into your head in real time. And you can't do that if you live in a country like China where you get penalized for, saying that Zhang didn't wipe his ass. Not even accusing him of sexual assault, but just saying like, I was in the bathroom with Zhang yesterday and he was shitting his brains out and I didn't hear the toilet paper. He didn't wipe his ass. He came out, barely washed his hands, and then he walked out of the bathroom. If you accuse Zhang of being a somewhat dirty guy who didn't wipe his ass, you might also be gone. It's scary to imagine living in a place where you can't say anything. And that makes me think, how bad is China? right now. What is it actually like to live in China as a Chinese citizen? Because how can you possibly know what it's like unless you live there yourself? Which I haven't. I would like to explore China at some point. But how can you possibly know what it's like to live in China as a Chinese citizen under this communist regime, because the narrative is so tightly controlled by social media and the lack of social media? If you're not allowed to speak the truth, if you're not allowed to say what's on your mind and say controversial things and disturbing things and share your opinions strongly and boldly and unfiltered, how the fuck do you know what it's like in China? And that is the number one way that you control someone is not to censor their stuff. It's to instill the fear of censorship, because that stops it from being shared in the first place. This is what's probably going on. You know, I don't know what happened to Peng Shui. She might be, maybe they're keeping her in a hotel room or something. They're not, because she's good for China's image. She is a professional tennis player. She brings in viewership and money to Chinese sports, so they probably don't want to hurt her, but she may be being kept in the fucking Beijing Four Seasons. I don't know. But to other people in China that don't have her status and don't have her celebrity, the message has been sent that if you have any sexual assault allegations, especially someone high up in the Chinese Communist Party, you will suffer real-world physical consequences. And again, I don't know what those consequences are, but that is the number one way that you censor people, is to instill fear before they even write that tweet, before they share that Facebook post, is to have examples of people suffering consequences right in front of you on Twitter. And then that keeps you from wanting to share anything because you have a family, you have a job. People care about their primal through lines, their primal pillars. People will do anything to protect their primal pillars. They want to eat, they want to sleep, they want to fuck, they want to make money and continue living. And you want to eat, sleep, fuck, make money so you can do the things that you want to do. And if you have something that takes those away, 99.9% of people are not going to share that post or tweet that thing about a leader in the country if those primal pillars will be sabotaged or sacrificed. And I don't blame those people, by the way. It's I blame Zhang, but I don't blame the people who are scared to speak out or fearful to speak out, because you don't know what the fuck is going to happen to you. And I am in a lucky situation recording this from the United States, where that truly is an afterthought to me, unless I'm reading about it, which is why I wanted to get into this. So her profile was taken down 20 minutes after the post. Her post was taken down. The English paper reports that let me get into this. So the Daily Mail shows her post, the now deleted image, which is all in Chinese. There's no translation, but I assume it's telling a story about how this guy Zhang abused her. The deleted post isn't the only thing to happen to her profile. The post was gone from Weibo, which is said to be heavily monitored by the Chinese government. Peng's profile was disabled at first, and she couldn't be found through a search, but it has since been found and does come up on Google search. So they even took away her profile from search, from Google search. Not from Google search, from just a search in general on Weibo. So Google search was intact. The English paper reports that all comments on our post have been disabled, and posting about either the accuser or the accused, even when not about the story, throws up the error. So you can't even post about the accuser or accused, about Peng Shui, what's happening to her, or the accused, the person. And again, that chops off any momentum or any sort of movement at its head, because when there is no data and there is no hard evidence yet. The thing that gets people to direct their attention to gathering hard evidence for something like a Harvey Weinstein situation is that there are hundreds and thousands of anecdotes that come out. Anecdotal evidence many times, the amalgamation of anecdotal evidence is not equal to physical evidence, but many times it is the precursor that incentivizes people to gather physical evidence. And when you aren't allowed to gather that anecdotal evidence in the form of tweets or Facebook posts, people coming together on social media, it's very hard to be motivated to gather physical evidence because people don't see it. It's not in front of their face. When the Me Too movement was first happening, and I would go on Twitter and everything was just about sexual assault. All these women telling stories about what happened to them some 20, 30 years ago, and just sharing these stories at first with no legal allegations in mind. I'm sure some of them had legal allegations, but it looked like a lot of these women just were inspired to share their story by coming across the stories of other women who are sharing similar things. And so when you cut off that empowerment tool on social media, when you cut off the power of seeing someone's story and seeing someone else's story similar to yours, it's impossible to make a movement. It's impossible to start a hashtag or whatever the fuck it is, because you can't even write about it. Not only can you not write about your accuser, but you can't even write about your accuser. You can't even insinuate something about your accuser. You can't even speak in code words, code names, whatever, because the government has taken that away from you. The player did admit she had no evidence of their prior affair. What is this? Is this the same article? The player did admit she had no evidence of their prior affair, so Peng Shui, or the sexual abuse she claims happens, but the politician wanted to keep the whole thing a secret. So no evidence of the prior affair, no evidence of sexual abuse. By the way, and this is an honest question. One of the big pushbacks that people have against rape cases is the lack of evidence that is gathered, or the lack of evidence that is even able to be gathered. Just the lack of evidence in rape cases. There are a lot of guys and men in particular, and I have thought about this as well, is you have a guy who is accused of rape, and he is exiled on social media with that accusation before the trial, before any evidence is presented. What is the evidence for rape? Because not all rapes are brutal in physical nature. There are a lot of times where the person being raped will give in and allow things to happen, even though it's against their consent. They will have the realization that if I fight back, this will make things worse than me, or worse for me. So there are people that are raped that come out of rapes with the appearance, the physical marks of consensual sex. There's, they don't have a black eye. There's no, there's no slashes. There's no violent marks on the private parts. And again, I'm just speculating. I'm in no way qualified to make any bold legal claims about rape. But I'm just thinking, how do you gain evidence? How do you make a good case against a rapist when a lot of the evidence may not be evidence in the way that we think of it? It's not physical evidence. It's this guy. I went back with this guy, and maybe he held a knife to me, or maybe you thought it was consensual sex, or maybe you thought it was gonna be way different than it ended up. Maybe you're a girl in her early 20s and you're at a bar in New York City and you go back with a guy. You go back to a guy's apartment. You weren't planning on having sex, but you wanted to go back. And the guy was set on having sex. And that's what he thought was going to happen. And then he gets angry. You feel very unsafe. Maybe the guy insinuates that he's going to hurt you, do something to you, going to harm you in some way if he doesn't get what he wants. Maybe he even physically holds you down, but it's not in a way that would leave a lot of marks. Maybe he's, restricting you or constraining you. And he's smart about it, so he's not using ropes or anything, but maybe he's just kind of like holding you down and saying, if you struggle, this is going to be worse for you. And then you get raped and you don't fight back because you don't want it to be worse than it already is and you want to get out of there alive. And then you have to go to the cops, say you were raped, and then the cops need to gather evidence in a case against this piece of shit guy. So what is the evidence? Is it... If it's not physical, how do you possibly indict someone for rape? Do you ask friends? Is there some sort of statistic where rape victims will tell someone early on or tell a friend? Do they go to friends and ask if you have had conversations with them? Do they look at the history of the guy? Like in such a he says, she says thing, how does a girl who was raped and, not claiming rape, but was actually raped. How do you express that through evidence? That's something, again, I've thought about the legal process of rape and of accusing someone of rape. And as someone who's not familiar with the legal process, I've wondered, how are these cases settled? Because we have the pop culture version of rape, which is that a guy holds a knife to your throat and maybe he ties you down and he punches you and beats the shit out of you. But rape is someone forcing you to have sex against your will. And a lot of times forcing someone to do something against their will doesn't leave physical marks, doesn't leave physical damage. So it's a tough thing. So there is no evidence of their prior affair. There's no evidence of the Peng Shui and Zhang Goli affair or the sexual abuse that she claims. Politician wanted to keep the whole thing a secret. It is not known why she chose the timing of her recent post, but it did say, "You said you are not afraid, but even as an egg hurled at a rock, a moth to a flame for self-destruction, I will speak the truth with you." She said, quote, "You've said you are not afraid, but even as an egg hurled at a rock, a moth to a flame for self-destruction, I will speak the truth to you." So it sounds like she's saying, even if I self-destruct for this, or even if someone else destroys me, if this leads to my own destruction, physically, mentally, emotionally, she's going to speak the truth. And that's a hell of a fucking statement right there. A spokesman for Beijing's foreign ministry was asked about the accusations earlier this month, but they refused to answer the questions. Not surprised at all. If you live in a communist country and you're a communist leader, why the fuck would you answer any questions when you control the media and you can just put out your own thing? Instead, they said, "I have not heard of it, and it is not a diplomatic question." Can you imagine that? Can you imagine if you go up to some guy and it's about the disappearance of a girl, and you just ask him some basic questions like, "Hey, where were you that night? Did you tell anyone where you were? We're trying to figure out what happened to this girl. If you have any information." And his answer is, "I have not heard of it, and it is not a diplomatic question. Thank you." If that's not the guiltiest shit I've ever heard in my life. If you use the word diplomatic in response to any accusation, you should automatically be deemed guilty. If someone asks you, "Did you steal the cookie from the cookie jar?" The 6-year-old asks her son, or if a mom asks her 6-year-old son, Frank, did you? And I don't know why the 6-year-old is named Frank. That name went out of style 4 decades ago. But let's just go with it. So if you're a mom and you ask your 6-year-old son, "Hey Frank, hey old wise Frank, you 6-year-old wise boy, did you steal the cookie from the cookie jar?" And Frank goes, "Mom, diplomatically, that's not a question. She should get rid of Frank right there because he is set to live a life of destruction. I would disown my kid on the spot if they ever answered a question using the word diplomatically. Same thing. It should be written into law right now. If you get accused of any crime and you use the word diplomatic, you're guilty. Life in prison. Give him the chair or her the chair. Where, gender equality. You should suffer to the fullest extent of the law." So this whole situation is fucked, and this is one of those stories where you don't know if more is going to come out about it, because it's just, even if she is a huge tennis star and a communist country wipes her off the face of the map, who's going to ask questions? How do you possibly investigate that? It would have to be someone Chinese doing it from the inside, because they're certainly not going to let someone from another country investigate this. So yeah, I won't be starting a Weibo account anytime soon. I barely use Facebook, but I will not be on Weibo. That's for sure. So, 34 minutes in. Let's go, baby. On to the next topic.